Today on Locked On Rockies, the Rockies make the wrong type of history, but is there a glimmer of hope amidst all the madness?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 28th day of August in the year 2023. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here is we talk about Colorado Rockies baseball each and every weekday, and we are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app, and you can also check us out on YouTube, where you can be part of the show, putting in your thoughts on the Colorado Rockies in the YouTube comments and letting us know what you think about the Rockies, the moves, and everything going on. Rockies did indeed make some moves amidst making the wrong type of history, but as much as we have to focus on that, and we do have to talk about it as one element and one factor to look into things, we also have to look at the fact that the Rockies seem to be at least, maybe, potentially closer to competency than we think. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about everything else in the world of Rockies baseball, all coming up in today's Locked On Rockies. So the Rockies, unfortunately, make history on Saturday as they blow a lead in the sixth inning or later and lost. The team was able to avoid the loss yesterday to making it another loss after blowing a lead late, taking the lead into the sixth inning or later. And it felt comical, honestly, for the end of it, especially on Saturday and Sunday, really, when it happened. I mean, it was almost as if everything was just on a script and going right according to plan. And man, it was just another thing on top of already pretty darn annoying and frustrating season. And what was really frustrating, I think, kind of at the end of it, watching it and experiencing it, is there's an alternate universe. I tweeted this out. There's an alternate universe where the Rockies are finishing back-to-back sweeps of two of the best teams in baseball on the road, led by a young core. And I kind of wanted to focus at least a little bit more around that. And I wanted to focus on the fact of this team was in these games, and there are factors to consider: the overworked bullpen, and there's X, Y, and Z to keep looking into it. So overall, in general, while the Rockies are the first team to do this, while the Rockies set themselves up to make the wrong type of history, while the Rockies yet again find themselves making headlines for losing, the Rockies were in a situation where a couple of things go their way a little bit more. They get a couple more bounces, and everyone is feels like it and steps up and takes a step kind of forward in their progression. Then the Rockies are in a situation where they make some noise against the AL East in one of the best divisions in baseball. But watching the Rockies overall, especially when you're considering long-term Rockies and players that you're thinking will be a factor long-term or at least going forward, more often than not, there were things to enjoy. I mean, this was a young road Rockies team, a Rockies team that historically has gone on the road and scored very little. This was a team that was able to go out on the road and put up, at least offensive presences. And at least they were in every single one of those 6 losses outside of the one that got, or, you can even go back to the 2 that got away from them, really. The Rockies were in those games, the White Sox and the Rays games being the back-to-back blowouts. But then all of the next 4 games for the Rockies in that losing streak were decided by 2 runs or fewer. by just one moment, one swing of the pendulum, and just kind of, and as much as we don't want to lean solely on the cliches, they did just get the bad bounces. But looking at this road trip, and even though it went as bad as it did, and that should be noted, yes, the Rockies did make history for losing again. The Rockies only won one game on this road trip. It's a bad road trip. But they weren't blown out, at least. And when we're looking for things this season, when we're looking for storylines and threads and things to follow, that's important. The Rockies could have swept, had moments to sweep, and maybe not so much in game one against the Rays, but had opportunities to win the series against Tampa and Baltimore, two teams that are really good. And so you're hoping that these moments and going through this and seeing and coming up this short when you're when you're being tested by good teams. We talked about the Dodgers being a test. That's got to feel good and fuel and fuel them to know that they want to be better. They don't want to make this history. They know that they were that close. It's how do they go? How do they ratchet up and take that next step? How do they, is it, for the offense, it's score a little bit more insurance runs, keep making it so close and letting your overworked bullpen have a little bit more to work with and be able to turn to other guys in different situations from your bullpen instead of relying on the same people in the same situations that you need because the games are so close. There's plenty to build off of and go up from here from a moment of, again, a low point. But it's a low point that you at least don't feel as despaired. You feel disappointed, you feel frustrated as a Rockies fan watching it, especially with the leads being blown late. But when you put it in the context of things, and it's a classic sports radio argument. I feel like Stugat's here, but in the way these are quality losses because the Rockies were right there with good teams on the road, especially and in Tampa, in a place they historically haven't played very well. The Rockies were also able to get good starting pitching performances, and unfortunately we're squandering them. But we were seeing little glimmers of the Rockies and the Rockies themselves being in these games, but unable to close. And we've talked about that. That goes with the big overall theme of what we've talked about this year for the Colorado Rockies is a lack of consistency, a lack of putting things together in terms of a competitive streak together, putting together a string of clean baseball and winning baseball. The Rockies have not been able to chain wins together very often this year and unfortunately go through long stretches like this. So when we look at this moment, when we look back at this stretch, when we think back on this season, and when we see progress from the Rockies, it's hopefully started from, and the guys can point out to, hey, if you remember back in a season like 2023, when we were this close to playoff teams, now we're beating them. Now we're handling them. When the Rockies are doing that, when the Rockies the next time the Rockies go out on the road with this team, hopefully, and go against this level of competition, maybe not next year, but the year after, and they beat them and they win the close games and they're the ones coming up with the heroics, we can look at this moment as something to look back to as an opportunity for them to grow from here. But yes, all in all, though, that's just the kind of the cheesy feel-good way of looking at it and just kind of going through the process of being a Rockies fan right now, because that's what you need to look for. You need to look for the things that you like. You need to look for young guys on the Rockies doing things to keep them in games. You need to look at the fact that they're getting performances and continued performances from some of their young guys. And the Rockies now have an interesting case with one of their biggest names and one of their franchise's most interesting players in Charlie Blackmon, because he is still swinging the bat really well and apparently interested in joining the Rockies again here in 24. So we'll talk about that coming up later in the show as well. But overall, it was incredibly frustrating to be a Rockies fan again this week. I don't want to undercut that. But at least this year, the frustrations are more grounded in just not and I'm missing those opportunities to have the bright moments in this year, and instead of being confused about moving forward, because at least we're seeing the young guys getting these opportunities, and highlighted again by Hunter Goodman making his debut in the finale. The Rockies are shifting from their longtime philosophy, as it's another example of the Rockies going with the young guys, and that's a good thing too. Let's talk about that coming up in segment number 2. Before we do that, got to tell you about our sponsor, Dave. Dave is the banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. At one time or another, we all need a little financial help. That's why Dave is great. Dave can get you cash when you need a hand between paychecks and can help you build credit by setting extra cash advances on time. When you download Dave, you can get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's part of Dave's Extra Cash account. Advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. Extra Cash gives you more money to buy groceries, fill your tank, finally get your car repaired, or catch up on bills without having to wait for your next paycheck. Download Dave today at dave.com/MLB. That's dave.com/MLB, and you can get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. Download the Dave app now or go to dave.com/MLB. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast, free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. You can also find us on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. Also, on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where everyone's hanging out there, talking rocks, hanging out, checking out the show. We had a great amount of people tune into the Fridays pod, where we looked into the efficiency of losing, as I was calling it, between the Orioles and the Rockies, and who has been able to navigate tough stretches better and have shorter, less frequent losing streaks and losing seasons versus each other. And it turns out the Orioles have been a lot more successful since the conception of the Rockies than the Rockies have been compared to the Orioles. So you can dive into that and listen to that there. And it was on display this weekend, with the Orioles being led by a bunch of really good young guys and a really good team that has depth. And unfortunate injury there to Batista there, their big-time closer, who just was so electric. That guy could just, I mean, there's just so many pieces on that Orioles team that was... They just have everything, it seems like, young guys and everything that just seems so impressive. But it took a lot to get there, and it took a lot of patience, and it took time. And that's kind of if what the Rockies did on Sunday and what they did on the trade deadline, the Rockies and Rockies fans are going to have to experience that patience and go with it, because the Rockies released a designate for assignment, Jurickson Profar. It was a DFA, I believe. I've got to double check that it was a DFA. But, I mean, it was, they released him, because I guess he was just released. So the Jurickson Profar thing, there's just zero reason, and it's nothing against Jurickson Profar. He got a chance to be on a major league ball club. He got a chance again to be on a team. He's good chance he ends up on a roster somewhere. His performance this year didn't earn him a spot in the lineup, overseeing what you have for the future of these young guys. So to have someone who has torn it up at the minor league level here in Hunter Goodman be able to come up and make his debut, and then not only do that, but make an impact in his debut, that's what encourages you. That's what makes you feel better as a Rockies fan. For me, there's really only one, maybe there's a small handful of veterans that I want to see do things on the field in terms of position players this year. I'm glad and honestly enthused about Charlie Blackmon and his return and his potential return next year. We're going to talk more about that. I want to see Ryan McMahon in the lineup. I want to see Brendan Rodgers. And Elias Diaz, of course, is a nice added bonus. The real nice one to see, of course, would be Chris Bryant. But we're not going to hold my breath about that one, at least right now. So what I mean is, I want to watch the young guys. I want to see the young guys handle see how they handle these good teams, see how they handle these situations. And yes, they came up short throughout this road trip, but that's what made these games entertaining and exciting to watch this during this losing streak. Even though it was bad and it ended up in losses and frustrating losses, I'm still encouraged when I get to see young guys making impacts on games. And it's super cool and highlighted as an extra cool thing when they do it on their debut here. I'm going to read from Thomas Harding's piece, Enjoy Today, through Black's advice. Goodman shines in debut here from MLB.com. Thomas Harding here, writing about the Rockies. And he writes, Goodman, who forced the call-up by hitting .371 with 9 home runs in 15 games with AAA Albuquerque after hitting .239 with 25 homers and 78 RBIs at AA Hartford, had 2 hits, the first one driving in a run, and scored the winning run on Elias Diaz's 9th inning RBI groundout. Goodman, the Rockies' number 12 prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, ended the day by snatching the final out behind closer Justin Lawrence, who needed the result just as much as any of the Rockies, who had lost 6 straight despite being tied or in the lead in the 8th inning or later. That's the sigh of relief. That's the momentum builder for a better stretch for the Rockies. A good late August into the final full month of the season stretch for the Rockies, led by the young guys. It can happen just like it did on Sunday there with Hunter Goodman, and it's an added bonus, and it makes you feel better about next steps for the Rockies and what they can do if Goodman continues to have a strong appearance here at the big leagues for however long it may be. But now with the you wish him the best. It's the business. But with the release of Profar, with the trade deadline, the Rockies are actually making continuous moves towards punting on the season, looking ahead, and seeing what they have, which is exactly what they need to do and have needed to do a few more times in the past. So that's the key takeaway. You can take the focus should go back in on Sunday's game. Look back on those other games. Look where the Rockies fell short. You can point to it absolutely, and this, that, and the other things. Bad stretches do happen, but again, I'm feeling pretty good that the young Rockies weren't shut out, blown away by 2 of the best teams in baseball. And now the Rockies have the young guys have another opportunity to kind of make up for a series that got away from the Rockies earlier in the year. Another great team, this time at home for the Rockies. How do you respond when the best team comes to your house? And when you have to handle great teams in your environment? Another key, these are just stackable learning moments for the young Rockies guys. And it's for 2023, it's enough. We'll see how it pans out in the future. We'll see how how things go going forward. But I'm encouraged by the Rockies' moves. I'm encouraged by the Rockies embracing this season for what it is and continuing to lead and go with the young guys. The Rockies playing 5 rookies and starting the Rockies started 5 rookies, going back to Harding's piece here. The 5 rookies who started Sunday, and Montero will receive the bulk of the at-bats in the rest of the season to make room for Goodman, a 23-year-old who was a 4th-round pick in 2021 out of Memphis. The Rockies released veteran outfielder Jurickson Profar, who will be eligible for the postseason if he hooks on with another team by Thursday. Goodman plays both corner outfield positions, but so does Tolia, while Montero is primarily a first baseman. There could be crowds at first base in the outfield when Chris Bryant returns from a left index fracture. Bryant has embraced the idea of playing some first base. So what the Rockies do with their young guys, how they're going to handle this lineup, the impact that Chris Bryant has on this whole plan and seeing what you have in the development of the Rockies is looming. And personally, I still think I'm sticking with it. I know it probably won't happen, but Chris Bryant should just be shut down for the season and let the young guys play and then fully heal and be ready to go. If he's going to make an impact, if he's going to shake up the lineup, he's got to be healthy. So why not see what we got, and why not continue to rotate and see what the rookies and let the young guys play for a little bit longer here as the season comes to a close in not that long. I mean, it's still months and some change, but I mean, it's crazy. The end of the season for the Rockies is looming. So instead of just sitting here and wallowing in the darkness that has been this season, I'm at least trying to find the small glimmers of hopes while not being ignorant. And I don't want to neglect. We cannot neglect the fact that the Rockies were on the wrong side of history again. But in a season like this, where the Rockies are at, it's important to look for the other things as well. It's important to look for the good in the storylines while also keeping in mind how bad it was, how the fact that this bullpen has regressed, and whether it be overwork or this, that, and the other thing, there are a lot of question marks there. The starting pitching question marks are still going to be there. But the Rockies also did get some performances, but there are other storylines there that just kind of leads to, well, it's the 2023 Colorado Rockies. It's really the best way I feel like to sum it all up. I want to talk about the potential return of Charlie Blackmon and his impact on the lineup here coming up in segment number 3. But before we do that, maybe you think Charlie Blackmon is going to get another hit, or maybe you're confident in the young Rockies. Well, if you are, why don't you check out Sleeper? Because if you think Charlie Blackmon can hit a home run tonight against the Braves, you can swing for the fences with Sleeper and get 100 times payout. All you have to do is choose 2 or more players that you like and select more or less on their stat categories like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win big. If you want to see what the slip looks like here on the YouTube channel, you can check it out. You just pick the players, pick the statistical categories, and build your slip. And when you use our promo code at Locked On, you can get yourself 100 times the payout here. So when you use promo code Locked On, you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply, but don't miss out on a $100 match on your first deposit when you want to test your daily fantasy skills, your baseball knowledge at Sleeper. Promo code Locked On is going to get you that $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network and on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. We are talking Rockies 5 days a week here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Check us out on YouTube as well. We head over here to Denver Sports, and we are going to read from them on Charlie Blackmon and a potential link up with the Rockies again next year. Let's check it out here. And this is from Jake Shapiro of Denver Sports. Many thought 2023 would be Charlie Blackmon's swan song, but the Colorado Rockies are interested in bringing back the 37-year-old for a 14th season. That's according to Patrick Saunders of the Denver Post. The 4-time All-Star hasn't been an elite player in years, but he has been hot as can be since coming off the injured list a few weeks ago. This was, I believe, before the game yesterday. So Blackmon is batting .421, 16 for 38 with 6 multi-hit games over 10 starts over the past 2 weeks. The designated hitter and right fielder came back on August 14th. So Bill Schmidt said this: yes, we are. If things working out, Schmidt told the Denver Post, Charlie would provide a good leadership structure for our young guys, and he can still play. Meanwhile, Blackmon told the Post, there is definitely a possibility I'll come back. I think I've been able to bounce back well from the hand injury, and I think we need a good mix of older players like myself to help the young players with adjustments and things like that. Honestly, it's a slam dunk. Because he doesn't block the outfield. Yes, he blocks DH. But at the same time, Blackmon's the guy that coming off this hand injury, you can't negate the impact that he has, not only for the Rockies on the field, but off the field. There is something to that mix, and Charlie Blackmon is the right type of guy to have in the Rockies locker room. He is the last guy as a position player really on this team that can talk about the winning Rockies. Ryan McMahon had the taste of it when he was younger, but Charlie Blackmon can give some context to what winning baseball feels like in Colorado, what it means to the city, what it means to be a Rockies player playing meaningful baseball and impactful baseball down the stretch, on top of being someone that can still swing a pretty good bat. Yes, Chris Bryant should perform better than Charlie Blackmon, and yes, Charlie Blackmon isn't going to be the best DH in baseball, but he's valuable to the team in multiple ways. As long as the role is understood of what Charlie Blackmon is, and if next year doesn't really pan out that well, he might, if he's willing to embrace a role that is, becomes more behind the scenes, which I think will be very hard for Charlie Blackmon. I think he will be on that field until he feels like he cannot be on that field no more. But I don't imagine him signing with another team, for example. If Charlie Blackmon's going to play baseball in 2024, I'm pretty confident it'll be with the Colorado Rockies, because I think it's the right place for Chuck in this stage of the career, because if he can continue to contribute, he's got a chance to help a Rockies team get back on track, make more noise. Who knows what happens in 2024? See what happens. I'm for it. The right type of deal, the right structure. It'll be a win for the Rockies. But it's an interesting one as well, because of what does happen if Chuck doesn't perform next year or gets injured. You still have the young guys to turn to, as I suppose. But I think it's the right veteran guy to keep around on the right type of deal, and I think the Rockies will get it done. And I don't think Chuck would go anywhere else. We'll see what happens, though. But anytime the Rockies have something worth talking about, we're talking about it here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Shout outs to our everydayers out there. Thank you for tuning in and hanging out with us here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. You can find us on your favorite streaming service. You can find us on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app, as well as your Colorado Rockies play-by-play action. You can also find us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.